Hi, this is Patrick Virgadamo. I'm a senior attorney with the Louisiana Legislative Auditor's Office, and this is Module 5, in which we'll be discussing research and navigating important websites that may be helpful for you in navigating procurement at the state and federal levels. So some of the research tools we're going to talk about are things that are accessible out there in the things that we've talked about in modules 1 through 4 that may be resources out there for you on those laws or things that may be helpful in navigating the procurement process. So for federal laws, especially those we talked about in module 4 for federal reimbursement, some of the websites that are important to you are govinfo.gov, the uscode.house.gov, and congress.gov, which provides you for electronic copies of the federal statutes. So those Stafford Act, those things we talked about in Module 4, you can get copies of those and the latest versions of those at these websites. As far as the Code of Federal Regulations, specifically important to you if you're getting federal reimbursement or using federal grant money, 2 CFR Part 200, you can obtain copies of those at www.ecfr.gov. It's important to note that website will allow you to access previous versions of those rules so that if you're looking at a disaster that was from, say, 5 years ago, you can look and see what the rules were at that time because those will continue to be applicable for you in those expenditures. FEMA, for those policy and guidance and disaster-specific policies and guidances, you're going to find those at FEMA.gov. FEMA's resource will also have links to some of these other federal resources that you may need in dealing with that 2 CFR procurement. So some important websites that I think will be important for you on the state side that we'll kind of talk about are the state of Louisiana, the Louisiana legislatures, the auditor's office, the AG, Board of Ethics, Office of State Procurement, the LMA, as well as the Office of State Register. So as far as the state of Louisiana, Louisiana.gov has a lot of resources, which includes resources on emergencies and disasters. So you can usually find copies of the emergency proclamations and disaster declarations that the governor declares, as well as links to various state agencies, including GOSEP. The Louisiana government also has links for the executive, legislative, judicial, as well as local governments and boards and commissions. So if dealing with an entity or looking at the procurement for those things, you can find information on these, usually starting at louisiana.gov. The legislature's website, similar to on those federal ones for accessing laws, you can find information for current legislation if you're trying to track what changes it may have on issues. You'll also find links to the actual laws, which all of the documents that the auditor's office publishes, those public bid FAQs and other frequently asked questions, we link to the statutes through the legislature's website. So you have the ability to pull up copies of those laws, which can be helpful so that you have those versions in front of you. It also has the ability to pull up bills. So if you know something that just passed in the last session, but maybe hasn't been changed in the statute itself, you can pull that and print that for your records. Now, the auditor's office, you'll find a lot of helpful information, including our summaries of law, our legal assistance FAQs on public bid procurement code, as well as some best practice guidance that our advisory services and local government services have put together. It's important to note those public bid FAQs. I suggest to people always kind of go and click and make sure you have the latest versions of these. We update those every year after session and during the year if there are any important HE opinions or court cases that need to be made note of in those summaries. You can also find other things for audit reports, as well as other guidance and links to information that may be helpful for you. It's also, if you ever misplace Angela or I's number, there's an easy way to get our information, as well as to submit questions. If you need help with something, you can submit those questions under our legal assistance page electronically, and it will get forwarded to Angela and myself or our general counsel, Ms. Shea, to try to respond back to you as quickly as possible. The Attorney General's office has some important information, specifically if you're looking for opinions, so that you're kind of documenting in your files why you your interpretation of that law is because the AG said so, this is where you can find those opinions. They also have helpful information on public records law and open meetings law. The Office of State Procurement, which we visited kind of in depth in Module 3, has a lot of helpful information about emergency procurement. It has a procurement handbook, has tons of contracts, which can be important when you're doing disaster-related contracting and you need to find stuff under a state contract. And so because those were already competitively done, generally speaking, you get a little more, it's a little easier to rely on those in those situations. The Board of Ethics, it's important because when we're looking at contracts, it necessarily involves interpretations of who can be involved in those contracts. Because and this is important for anybody who's reviewing those contracts, because you have to remember not just to comply with the amounts and thresholds, but you also want to make sure it's not somebody's brother-in-law that's not supposed to be contracting doing that contracting, because that's another requirement that has to be met in order for that contract to be not void. The LMA can be a very helpful resource, because anytime if you're looking at contracts and looking at information and need contact information for that local political subdivision, they have a lot of guidance for their members, those municipalities, but you also have the ability to look up and get the contact information for those municipalities, which can be helpful if you're trying to piggyback on a contract and you need an email address or a number to reach out to, because you were told this municipality just did that contract. That's a way to get that contact information. LMA's directory also will let you know the type of entity that you're dealing with. So if they're a Larson Act, home rule charter, legislative charter, things of those sorts, which can let you know if there's specific other rules that they have to follow that may be different than yours. The Office of State Register, it's important because it is the entity where when Louisiana agencies promulgate rules, which would include GOSEP or anybody who's using a rule like the Office of State Procurement, where may issue promulgate rules, those rules are promulgated through the state register. It is also where legal notices are posted, including copies of emergency declarations by the governor, proclamations, executive orders. All of those are promulgated on that website. So it's a very useful website for that. It is also where you can find copies of the Louisiana Administrative Code, where those rules, as they get promulgated, get updated and codified. And so it's a good one-stop shop for that information. All of these websites are ones that are probably helpful to kind of keep in your toolbox, but they should never be something that completely replaces doing your own kind of due diligence. I would suggest in some of these cases, just like when we talked about in Module 3 about don't just rely on what you're seeing on the state contract, reach out to OSP. Similarly, if you have issues and you're not quite sure, reach out to the entity that can help you on that. When in doubt, give us a call. Because if it's not something we have the answer for you, we will definitely try to get you where you can get that information. So I would definitely say bookmark these websites. They're an easy resource, so that they're free resources that are out there to get this information and can be helpful for you as you navigate the procurement, state and federal procurement landscape. Again, our website, we have a lot of legal assistance tools that are out there for you, and would strongly suggest kind of making yourself familiar with those. We also have the ability for you to have our number to call out, to reach out to us, as well as submit questions. And so definitely feel free to reach out to us. Again, if we don't necessarily have an answer for you, we will absolutely work with you to try to get that information and get you to someone who can give you the answers you need. With that, I would say reach out to myself or to Angela Heath. We are always happy to help you. Again, if we don't have an answer for you, we will at least try to get you to someone who can. And with that, I thank you.